The sound of the jackhammer cutting through concrete filled the air. I stood on my front porch, watching in complete disbelief as chunks of my driveway flew in every direction. Corinne Thompson, our HOA president, stood there with her arms crossed and that smug smile I had come to hate. "This is what happens when you do not follow the rules," she shouted over the noise. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But I just stood there, recording everything on my phone, because something deep in my gut told me this was going to end very badly for her. The contractor suddenly stopped. His face went white. The smell hit us all at the same time. That is when I realized Corinne had just destroyed the main gas line that fed our entire neighborhood. My name is David, and I have lived in Sunset Hills subdivision for 8 years. I am not the type of person who looks for trouble. I go to work, come home, mow my lawn, and mind my own business. I thought that was enough to keep me out of HOA drama. I was wrong. It all started on a Saturday morning in March. I noticed a small crack running down the middle of my driveway. Nothing major, just a hairline fracture that needed some concrete filler and a weekend afternoon to fix. I had done this kind of repair before at my old house. Simple maintenance that any homeowner should be able to handle. I was mixing the concrete patch when I heard the click of high heels on pavement behind me. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you are doing?" I turned around to see Corinne Thompson marching toward me with her signature clipboard, and that look of disapproval she wore like expensive jewelry. Corinne was our HOA president, a woman in her early 50s who treated our neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She had perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and the kind of attitude that made you feel like you were bothering her just by existing. "Good morning, Corinne. Just fixing a small crack in my driveway." She stopped 3 feet away from me and started writing something on her clipboard. "Did you submit a modification request to the Architectural Review Committee?" I blinked at her. "For patching a crack. Any alteration to the exterior of your property requires approval. That includes driveways." She said this like she was explaining basic math to a child. I set down my mixing bucket and tried to keep my voice calm. "Corinne, this is not a modification. This is maintenance. The crack is maybe 6 inches long. I do not care if it is 6 millimeters long. Rules are rules." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "You need to stop what you are doing immediately and submit the proper paperwork." My hands started to shake with frustration. "How long does that take?" 6 to 8 weeks for review, assuming the committee approves your request." 6 to 8 weeks, for a crack that would take me 2 hours to fix. And what if they do not approve it? Corinne's smile got wider. "Then you hire a professional contractor who is approved by the HOA to do the work properly." I looked down at the small crack in my driveway, then back at Corinne. This was insane, but I could see from the look in her eyes that she was not going to back down. She was enjoying this. "Fine," I said. "I will submit the paperwork." "Good, and you need to clean up all of this immediately." She gestured at my concrete mix and tools. "Having construction materials visible from the street is also a violation." I spent the next hour cleaning up my weekend project while Corinne watched from across the street, taking pictures with her phone. Every few minutes she would write something else on her clipboard. That night I sat at my kitchen table filling out a 4-page form to patch a crack in my own driveway. The application fee was $50. The review process could take 2 months, and there was no guarantee they would even approve it. I signed the paperwork and decided to wait. I was about to learn that patience was not going to be enough. Corinne was back the next morning. This time she brought backup. I was having my coffee on the front porch when her white BMW pulled into my driveway, followed by a silver Mercedes. Corinne got out first, wearing another one of her power suits. Two other people climbed out of the Mercedes. I recognized them as Tom Bradley and Susan Chen, the other two members of our HOA board. Corinne marched up to my porch with an official-looking envelope in her hand. Tom and Susan flanked her like bodyguards. "David, this is your formal violation notice." She handed me the envelope with a satisfied smile. I opened it right there on my porch. The letter was 3 pages long and full of legal language, but the bottom line was clear. I had 24 hours to remove all evidence of unauthorized driveway work, or I would face daily fines of $100 until the violation was corrected. "Wait a minute," I said. "I submitted the application yesterday. I have not done any work since then." "The evidence of your violation is still visible," Corinne replied. She pointed at my driveway. "You can see where you started to apply the concrete patch before I stopped you." I looked at my driveway. There was maybe a tablespoon of dried concrete mix stuck to the edge of the crack. "You want me to pay fines because of that tiny spot?" "Rules are rules," Susan said, speaking for the first time. "We have to be consistent with all homeowners." Tom nodded along but would not make eye contact with me. I could tell he was uncomfortable with this whole thing, but he was not going to stand up to Corinne. "This is ridiculous," I said. "I will just scrape it off." "Too late for that," Corinne said. "The violation has been documented. You need to hire a professional to restore your driveway to its original condition." "Original condition? It has a crack in it." "Then you need to hire a professional to repair the crack properly." Corinne's voice got louder. "Through the approved process, with an approved contractor." I asked her for a list of approved contractors. She handed me another piece of paper with 5 names on it. I called all 5 that afternoon. The first 2 did not even return my calls. The third one laughed when I described the job. "You want me to come out and scrape off a tablespoon of concrete? My minimum charge is $500. The fourth contractor was more helpful. He came out to look at the driveway and gave me a quote: $8,300 to fix a hairline crack and scrape off the evidence of my amateur repair attempt. $8,000. I stared at him in disbelief. "Look, I know it sounds high, but your HOA has very specific requirements. I have to remove a 2-foot section around the crack, pour new concrete, and let it cure for 72 hours. Then I have to apply a sealant that matches the exact color of your existing driveway. Your HOA lady was very clear about the specifications." Your HOA lady. Corinne had already talked to him. That evening, I decided to appeal to the full HOA board. Our monthly meeting was in 3 days. Surely the other members would see how insane this was getting. I was wrong again. The meeting was held in the community center conference room. About 20 homeowners showed up, which was typical. Corinne sat at the head of the table like she was running a corporate board meeting. When it was time for new business, I stood up and explained my situation. I kept my voice calm and reasonable. I showed pictures of the tiny crack and the microscopic amount of concrete mix that had caused this whole mess. "I just want to fix a small crack in my own driveway," I concluded. "This should not require $8,000 and 2 months of paperwork." A few people nodded in agreement. I thought I might actually get somewhere. Then Corinne stood up. "This is exactly the kind of thinking that destroys property values," she said. "If we let one person ignore the rules, then everyone will ignore the rules. Pretty soon our neighborhood will look like a construction zone. She went on for 10 minutes about property values and community standards and the importance of following procedures. By the time she was done, the other homeowners were looking at me like I was trying to turn our neighborhood into a slum. The board voted 4-1 to uphold the violation. Tom Bradley was the only dissenting vote, and he apologized to me afterward. "My hands are tied," he said. "Karen has the rest of the board convinced that any flexibility will lead to chaos." Walking back to my house that night, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. 3 of my neighbors quickly looked away when I waved at them. Word was getting around that I was the troublemaker who did not want to follow the rules. Karen was not just trying to collect fines from me. She was turning the entire neighborhood against me. I woke up on Thursday morning to the sound of diesel engines in my driveway. I rushed to the front window and could not believe what I was seeing. A city inspector's truck was parked on the street. Behind it was a white pickup truck with Morrison Construction painted on the side. In the back of the pickup was a jackhammer. Karen stood next to both vehicles, talking to 2 men in hard hats and safety vests. I threw on clothes and ran outside. "What is going on here?" I shouted. Karen turned to me with that same smug smile. "You missed the deadline, David. The 48-hour grace period expired at midnight. I am taking action to protect our community's property values." "What deadline? What grace period? Nobody told me about any grace period." The city inspector, a tired-looking man in his 60s, stepped forward. "Sir, we have a complaint about unauthorized concrete work on your property. The HOA has requested that we witness the correction of the violation." I felt like I was losing my mind. There is no unauthorized concrete work. There is a crack in my driveway and a tiny spot of concrete mix. "That is not what I see here," Karen said. She showed the inspector her photos. "This homeowner attempted to do major driveway repairs without permits or approval. When we stopped him, he refused to hire a proper contractor to fix the damage." The contractor, a stocky man with calloused hands, was already unloading his jackhammer. "Ma'am, you said you wanted the whole driveway section removed, right? About a 4-foot by 4-foot area." "That is correct," Karen said. 4 feet by 4 feet. She wanted him to jackhammer a 16-square-foot section of my driveway to remove a spot of concrete the size of a quarter. "This is insane." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Karen, you are destroying my property over nothing." "I am protecting property values," she replied calmly. "This is what happens when homeowners think they can ignore the rules." The contractor looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I am just here to do the job I was hired for. If you have a problem with it, you need to work that out with the lady who hired me." I called the police. The dispatcher said they would send someone out, but it might take a while because this sounded like a civil matter. "Please hurry," I said. "Someone is destroying my driveway." By the time I hung up, the contractor had started the jackhammer. The noise was incredible. It echoed off the houses and rattled windows up and down the street. Neighbors started coming outside to see what was happening. Some of them looked shocked. Others just watched like it was entertainment. I kept recording everything. Karen stood there supervising the destruction of my driveway with the same expression she might have while watching someone mow their lawn. Completely calm, completely satisfied. The contractor worked in a methodical grid pattern, breaking up the concrete into chunks that he tossed into the back of his truck. With each strike of the jackhammer, I felt my anger growing. This was not about property values or community standards. This was personal. Corinne had decided to make an example out of me, and she was enjoying every second of it. After 20 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up. The officer who got out was young, maybe late 20s. He looked around at the scene with confusion. "Who called about property destruction?" he asked. I raised my hand. "Officer, this woman is having my driveway destroyed without my permission." Corinne immediately stepped forward with her clipboard. "Officer, I am the president of this neighborhood's HOA. This homeowner violated our community covenants, and we are correcting the violation according to our legal authority." The officer looked at me, then at Corinne, then at the man with the jackhammer who had stopped to listen to the conversation. "Sir, do you live here?" he asked me. "Yes, this is my house." "And ma'am, you have legal authority to order this work." Corinne handed him a thick folder. "All the documentation is right here. HOA covenants, violation notices, board meeting minutes. Everything is completely legal." The officer spent 10 minutes reading through Corinne's paperwork. Finally, he looked up at me with an apologetic expression. "Sir, this appears to be a civil matter between you and your HOA. If you think they are exceeding their authority, you will need to resolve that in court." He got back in his cruiser and drove away. The jackhammer started up again. The contractor had been working for about 45 minutes when everything changed. He was making good progress on Corinne's 16-square-foot destruction zone. Chunks of concrete littered my driveway and the street. The noise had settled into a steady rhythm that seemed to shake the entire neighborhood. Then the jackhammer hit something that made a completely different sound. Instead of the usual concrete-breaking crash, there was a sharp metallic clang that rang out like a bell. The contractor immediately stopped and stepped back from the hole he had been digging. "What was that?" Corinne asked. The contractor knelt down and peered into the hole. His face went pale. "Oh no," he said quietly. "Oh no, no, no." I moved closer to see what he was looking at. At the bottom of the hole, maybe 18 inches down, I could see a bright yellow pipe. The jackhammer had cracked it open, and there was a jagged gash running along its length. That was when the smell hit us. Natural gas, thick and choking, rising out of the hole like invisible poison. "Everybody get back," the contractor shouted. He dropped his jackhammer and ran toward his truck. "Get back right now." I did not need to be told twice. The smell was getting stronger by the second. But as I backed away from the hole, I noticed Corinne was still standing there, staring down at the damaged pipe with a look of complete confusion. "What is that?" she asked. "Gas line," the contractor yelled. He was already on his phone. "Major gas line. Everyone needs to get away from that hole right now." That was when Corinne's expression changed. The smug confidence disappeared, replaced by something I had never seen on her face before: fear. "But I called for utility marking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I called the city. They said there were no utilities in that area." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I had taken 3 weeks ago. "I called them too, Corinne. Look at the date stamp. They marked my entire driveway area. See those yellow flags? That was the gas line." She stared at my phone screen. The photos clearly showed yellow utility flags marking a line that ran directly under the area she had just ordered destroyed. "You removed the flags," I said. "I saw you pull them up last week." The contractor was shouting into his phone. "Emergency services. I need gas company emergency response at 1247 Maple Street. We have a major gas leak. Jackhammer punctured a main line." Within minutes, The air was filled with sirens. The first responders arrived like an invading army. Fire trucks, gas company vehicles, police cars, and an ambulance all converged on my quiet suburban street. Men in hard hats and safety gear swarmed around the hole in my driveway. A gas company supervisor, a serious-looking woman in her 40s, took charge of the scene immediately. "How big is the leak?" she asked the contractor. "Big, I hit it with a jackhammer. There is a gash maybe 6 inches long." She knelt down and examined the damage, then stood up and started barking orders into her radio. "This is a major supply line," she announced to everyone within earshot. "We need to evacuate a 6-block radius immediately. This line feeds the entire neighborhood." 6 blocks, that was over 200 homes. Fire trucks began moving through the neighborhood with their loudspeakers, ordering everyone to evacuate immediately. Families poured out of their houses carrying suitcases and pets, and whatever they could grab in a few minutes. I stood in the middle of it all, watching my neighborhood empty out because of Karen's vendetta against my driveway crack. Karen was talking frantically to anyone who would listen, trying to explain that this was all a mistake, that she had followed proper procedures, that someone else must be to blame. But I had the photos, I had the videos, I had documented everything. The gas company supervisor approached us as her crew worked to shut off the flow of gas. "Who authorized this excavation?" she asked. Karen and I both started talking at the same time. "Ma'am," the supervisor said, holding up her hand, "one at a time. Who hired the contractor?" "I did," Karen said. "I am the HOA president. This homeowner was in violation of our covenants." "Did you call for utility location before beginning excavation?" "Of course I did. I followed all the proper procedures." I held up my phone. "I have photos of the utility markings. They were removed before the work began." The supervisor looked at my photos, then at Karen, then back at my photos. "Ma'am, when did you call for utility location?" Karen fumbled through her paperwork. "Last Tuesday. They told me there were no utilities in that area." "Sir, when did you call?" 3 weeks ago. They marked everything. I have photos with timestamps." The supervisor studied my photos for a long moment. "Ma'am, utility markings are only valid for 2 weeks. If you called last Tuesday for work today, the markings would have been invalid anyway. But according to these photos, there were clearly marked gas lines in this exact location." Karen's face went white. "Ma'am, who removed these marking flags?" Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. The contractor, who had been listening to the whole conversation, stepped forward. "Lady, you told me there were no utilities. You said you had checked and the area was clear." I thought the flags were old." The supervisor looked at all of us with the expression of someone who had seen this exact situation too many times before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at approximately $50,000 in emergency repairs, plus the cost of evacuating and housing 200 families until we can make this safe. Someone is going to be held liable for this." Karen looked like she was about to faint. The evacuation lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of emergency crews working around the clock to repair the gas line that Karen had ordered destroyed. 6 hours of 200 families staying in hotels or with relatives because their homes were not safe. 6 hours of local news crews interviewing anyone who would talk about the HOA gas line disaster. I spent those 6 hours at a coffee shop 3 miles away, watching the coverage on the news and fielding phone calls from reporters who had gotten my number somehow. Is it true that your HOA president ordered the destruction of your driveway over a small crack? The reporter from Channel 7 asked me. That is exactly what happened, I said. I have video of the entire thing. By evening, the gas company had finished their emergency repairs and declared the neighborhood safe. Families started returning to their homes. I drove back to Maple Street to find news vans lining both sides of my block. My driveway looked like a war zone. The small hole that had started this disaster had been expanded into a crater 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep. Orange safety cones surrounded the area, and caution tape fluttered in the evening breeze. Corinne's BMW was parked in front of her house, but all the lights were off. She was hiding. The gas company supervisor found me as I was surveying the damage. "Mr. Peterson, I need to get a statement from you about what happened here today." We sat in her truck while I told her the whole story, from the original crack in my driveway to Corinne's decision to have it jackhammered without checking for current utility markings. "Do you have documentation of the utility marking you requested?" she asked. I showed her everything: the photos of the marked utilities, the timestamp showing they were taken 3 weeks ago, the video of Corinne removing the flags, the video of her ordering the contractor to begin work despite my protests. "This is very helpful," she said. "We will need copies of all of this for our investigation." "What kind of investigation?" "Property damage investigation. Someone is responsible for $53,000 in emergency repairs, plus the cost of the evacuation. We need to determine who that someone is." I thought about Corinne hiding in her dark house. What happens to her? That depends on what our investigation finds. If she acted negligently or recklessly, she could face criminal charges in addition to civil liability. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened the door to find a reporter from the local newspaper standing on my porch. "Mr. Peterson, I am writing a story about yesterday's gas leak. Can you tell me what led up to this?" I told her the story. She took notes and pictures. She asked if she could interview Corinne as well. "Good luck with that," I said. "She has not answered her door since yesterday." The story ran on the front page of the local section 2 days later. HOA President's Driveway Vendetta Leads to Gas Emergency. The article included photos of my crater-sized driveway and quotes from several neighbors who said they had always thought Corinne was too aggressive with HOA enforcement. More reporters called. A local radio talk show wanted to interview me. Someone created a Facebook group called Sunset Hills Gas Leak Victims that gained 300 members in 2 days. The story was starting to go viral locally. But the real consequences were just beginning. On Friday, I received a certified letter from the gas company. It was addressed to me, but also to Corinne Thompson and the Sunset Hills HOA board. The letter was simple and direct. The gas company was seeking reimbursement for $53,000 in emergency repairs and evacuation costs. They expected payment within 30 days, or they would pursue legal action against all responsible parties. I called Tom Bradley, the only board member who had voted against Corinne's violation notice. "Tom, did you get the letter from the gas company?" "Yeah, I got it. So did everyone else on the board. We are having an emergency meeting tonight." "Is Corinne going to be there?" "That is what we need to discuss." The emergency board meeting was held at Tom's house instead of the community center. I was not invited, but Tom called me afterward to tell me what happened. "Corinne showed up with a lawyer," he said. "She tried to argue that this was not her fault, that the contractor should have checked for utilities himself. What did the rest of the board say? We told her lawyer that we have video evidence of Karen ordering the work to proceed despite knowing about the utility markings. Her own lawyer told her she did not have a defensible position. So what happens now? The board voted to remove Karen as president, effective immediately. We also voted to deny HOA insurance coverage for this incident. Can you do that? Our insurance company already did it for us. They reviewed the evidence and determined that Karen acted outside the scope of her authority and in a reckless manner. They will not cover any damages. Karen was on her own. The meeting was held at City Hall on a Tuesday morning in April. Present were representatives from the gas company, the city attorney, the new HOA board, Karen and her lawyer, and me with my folder full of documentation. Karen looked like she had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a plain black suit instead of her usual designer outfits. She would not make eye contact with anyone. The gas company representative spoke first. We are here to resolve the matter of $53,000 in damages caused by the unauthorized excavation at 1247 Maple Street. We have completed our investigation and determined that the excavation was ordered by Mrs. Karen Thompson, president of the Sunset Hills HOA, without proper utility clearance and in direct violation of safety protocols. Karen's lawyer, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit, immediately objected. My client followed all proper HOA procedures. She had the authority to order corrective action for covenant violations. Any negligence was on the part of the contractor who failed to verify utility clearances. I opened my folder and laid out the timeline. March 15th, I called for utility marking, I said, showing the photos. Yellow flags were placed marking the gas line that runs under my driveway. March 28th, I have video of Karen removing those flags from my property. April 2nd, Karen ordered excavation work in the exact location where the flags had been placed. The city attorney studied my photos and videos. Mrs. Thompson, did you remove utility marking flags from Mr. Peterson's property? Karen whispered something to her lawyer. He cleared his throat. My client may have removed some old surveying flags that she believed were no longer valid. Utility marking flags are bright yellow and clearly labeled, the gas company representative said. They are not surveying flags, and they are not placed by surveyors. Furthermore, I continued, I have video of Karen ordering the contractor to proceed with the excavation, despite my protests that there were gas lines in that area. I played the video on my phone. Everyone in the room could hear Karen's voice clearly. I do not care what he says. Start the jackhammer. Karen's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. The gas company representative laid out the damages. Emergency response costs, $18,000. Evacuation coordination, $12,000. Pipeline repair and replacement, $23,000. Total damages, $53,000. Additionally, the city attorney added, we are considering criminal charges for reckless endangerment. Mrs. Thompson's actions put over 200 residents at risk of explosion or gas poisoning. That was when Karen finally spoke. I was just trying to protect property values, she said, her voice barely audible. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Mrs. Thompson, the gas company representative said, intent is not relevant here. You ordered excavation work without proper clearance. You removed safety markings. You ignored warnings from the property owner. This was not an accident. This was negligence. Karen's lawyer tried one more time to shift blame. The contractor should have verified utility clearances independently. The contractor was hired by your client, the city attorney replied. She told him the area was clear. She had removed the markings that would have warned him about the gas line. The responsibility lies entirely with Mrs. Thompson. The new HOA board president, Susan Chen, spoke up for the first time. The board has voted to distance itself from Mrs. Thompson's actions. She exceeded her authority and violated our own safety protocols. The HOA will not be providing legal or financial support for this matter. Karen looked at Susan with shock and betrayal. You voted for the violation notice, Karen said. You supported my decision. We supported a violation notice for unauthorized driveway work, Susan replied. We never authorized you to order excavation without utility clearance. We never authorized you to remove safety markings. You did those things on your own. The meeting ended with Karen facing the full $53,000 liability, plus potential criminal charges, plus legal fees that were already approaching $10,000. As we filed out of the conference room, Karen's lawyer pulled her aside for a whispered conversation. I could not hear what they were saying, but Karen started crying. Outside the building, Tom Bradley caught up with me. David, I owe you an apology. I should have stood up to Karen from the beginning. This whole thing got way out of hand. What is going to happen to her? Tom shook his head. Her lawyer told our lawyer that she does not have $53,000. Her house is only worth about $200,000, and she still owes $140,000 on the mortgage. She is looking at bankruptcy. And the criminal charges. The district attorney is still reviewing the case, but with the video evidence of her ignoring safety warnings and removing utility markings, it does not look good for her. Walking back to my car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was glad that justice was being served, but I took no pleasure in watching Karen's life fall apart. All of this could have been avoided if she had just let me patch a crack in my driveway. 2 months later, the for sale sign went up in Karen's front yard. I was working in my garden when the real estate agent hammered it into her lawn. Karen stood at her living room window watching, but she ducked away when she saw me looking. The house sold within 3 weeks, below market value according to the neighbors. Karen needed cash fast to settle her debts. The gas company had agreed to accept $35,000 as full payment, which was all Karen could manage after selling her house and liquidating her retirement accounts. The criminal charges were dropped in exchange for her paying restitution and agreeing to never serve on an HOA board again. My driveway, meanwhile, had never looked better. The gas company's repair work had required them to completely re-pour the section that Karen had ordered destroyed. They used high-grade concrete and professional finishing techniques. The crack that had started this whole mess was completely gone, and I did not pay a penny for the repair. The new HOA board, led by Susan Chen, had implemented new policies requiring board approval for any enforcement actions involving property damage. They also established an appeal process and required training for all board members on the limits of HOA authority. We learned a lot from the Karen situation, Susan told me at the next community meeting. Nobody should have that much unchecked power over their neighbors. The story had become local legend. The Channel 7 news report had been shared thousands of times on social media. A legal blog had written about it as an example of HOA overreach. I received emails from homeowners across the country who had their own HOA horror stories. But the most satisfying part was not the viral fame or the free driveway repair. It was the apology letters. Over the course of 2 weeks, I received handwritten notes from 6 different neighbors. They apologized for avoiding me during the height of the conflict. They thanked me for standing up to Corinne's bullying. They admitted they had been afraid to speak out because they did not want to become her next target. "You did what all of us should have done years ago," wrote Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down. "Corinne had been terrorizing this neighborhood for too long." Tom Bradley stopped by one evening with a bottle of wine and a confession. "I knew Corinne was out of control," he said. "She had been picking fights with homeowners for months over stupid things. Mailbox heights, flower bed colors, Christmas decorations. But I kept hoping someone else would deal with it." "Why did you vote against the violation notice?" I asked. "Because I knew she was targeting you personally. You were not the first person she had gone after, but you were the first person who fought back." "What happened to the others?" "Most people just paid the fines or hired the expensive contractors. It was easier than fighting her. But you had documentation and you knew your rights. That made all the difference." The final piece of justice came 6 months later. I received a certified letter from Corinne's new address in another state. It was a single page, handwritten in careful script. "David, I owe you an apology. My behavior toward you was unprofessional and personal. I let my authority go to my head and I made decisions based on pride rather than good judgment. The gas line incident could have killed people, and that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I hope you can forgive me someday. Corinne." I kept the letter, not because I enjoyed having it, but because it reminded me of an important lesson. When someone with authority starts abusing that authority, somebody has to stand up to them. Most people will look the other way or hope someone else deals with the problem. Sometimes you have to be the person who says no. Sometimes you have to be the person who documents everything and fights back. Sometimes you have to be willing to let a bully face the consequences of their own actions. My driveway crack had been 6 inches long. Corinne's vendetta had cost her everything she had worked for. The punishment did not fit the crime, but the punishment fit the pattern of behavior that led to the crime. I learned that standing up to bullies is not about revenge. It is about accountability. It is about making sure that people who abuse their power face consequences for that abuse. And sometimes, if you are patient and document everything, the bully will destroy themselves.